Sarah Mitchell had always been different from other women her age. At 28, she possessed a rare combination of intelligence, physical strength, and an almost supernatural ability to read people and situations. Her colleagues at the Department of Defense often joked that she had ice water running through her veins, but they said it with respect. Sarah was one of the few civilian intelligence analysts who had earned the trust of the most elite military units in the country. The morning started like any other Tuesday in her small apartment overlooking the Potomac River. Sarah sipped her black coffee while reviewing classified reports on her secure laptop. The intelligence suggested increased terrorist activity along the Syrian border, and several Navy SEAL teams had been deployed for reconnaissance missions. What caught her attention was a pattern in the communications intercepts that others had missed. Someone was feeding information to the enemy, and American lives were at stake. Her phone buzzed with an urgent message from her supervisor, Commander Roberts. The message was brief, but alarming. 3 separate SEAL teams had gone silent during what should have been routine surveillance operations. The last known positions placed them in a mountainous region controlled by a ruthless terrorist organization known as the Black Serpent. Sarah knew this group well from her years of studying their tactics and leadership structure. Within 2 hours, Sarah found herself on a military transport plane heading toward a forward operating base in Jordan. The mission was unprecedented for a civilian analyst. She was being sent to coordinate with local intelligence assets and help locate the missing SEALs before it was too late. The flight gave her time to study the terrain maps and review everything known about the Black Serpent's operations in the region. The organization was led by a man known only as the Commander, whose real identity remained a mystery to Western intelligence agencies. What they did know painted a picture of a brilliant and ruthless individual who had spent years perfecting guerrilla warfare tactics. The Black Serpent specialized in psychological warfare, often capturing enemy soldiers alive to use as bargaining chips or examples of their power. Upon landing at the forward operating base, Sarah was briefed by Colonel Martinez, a veteran officer who had been tracking the Black Serpent for over 3 years. The situation was worse than initial reports indicated. The 3 SEAL teams, comprising 18 elite soldiers, had been captured during coordinated raids that suggested intimate knowledge of American operational procedures. Someone with access to classified information had betrayed them. Sarah spent the next 2 days working around the clock, analyzing communication patterns and coordinating with local informants. Her breakthrough came when she identified a series of coded messages that revealed the location where the SEALs were being held. It was an abandoned monastery nestled in a remote mountain valley, approximately 40 miles from the nearest friendly forces. The decision to send Sarah on the reconnaissance mission was controversial. Several officers argued that a civilian had no place in such a dangerous operation, but Sarah's unique knowledge of the Black Serpent's communication methods made her invaluable. She would accompany a small team of rangers to gather intelligence on the monastery's defenses and determine the best approach for a rescue operation. The helicopter dropped Sarah and 4 rangers at a landing zone 5 miles from the target. The journey through the rugged terrain took them most of the night, moving carefully to avoid detection. Sarah proved herself capable of keeping pace with the seasoned soldiers, her years of physical training serving her well in the demanding environment. As dawn approached, they reached an observation point that provided a clear view of the monastery. Through high-powered binoculars, Sarah could see the compound's layout and identify potential entry and exit points. What she observed confirmed her worst fears about the Black Serpent's capabilities. The monastery had been converted into a sophisticated prison facility with multiple guard towers and strategic defensive positions. More troubling was the discovery of advanced communication equipment that suggested the terrorists had access to military-grade technology. Sarah realized that the Black Serpent wasn't just holding the SEALs for ransom or propaganda purposes. They were using the captured soldiers as bait to lure additional American forces into a carefully prepared trap. Her analysis of the compound's defenses revealed a disturbing truth. The Black Serpent had positioned their forces in a way that would make a traditional rescue assault extremely costly in terms of American lives. They were counting on the military's unwillingness to abandon captured soldiers, knowing that any rescue attempt would likely result in significant casualties. As Sarah prepared to radio her findings back to the forward operating base, the Rangers with her began exhibiting strange behavior. The team leader, Sergeant Collins, started asking probing questions about her analysis and seemed unusually interested in the timing of any potential rescue operation. Sarah's instincts, honed by years of intelligence work, began sending warning signals. Her suspicions were confirmed when she noticed Collins speaking quietly into his radio, using a frequency that wasn't part of their mission's communication protocol. The pieces suddenly fell into place with terrifying clarity. Collins was the source of the intelligence leaks that had led to the capture of the SEAL teams. He had been feeding information to the Black Serpent, and Sarah had walked directly into his trap. Before she could react, Collins and another ranger had their weapons pointed at her. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of the immediate danger, but because it confirmed that American soldiers were dying due to treachery from within their own ranks. Collins smiled coldly as he explained that Sarah's expertise had made her too dangerous to the Black Serpent's operations. Her ability to decode their communications and predict their tactics posed a significant threat to their future activities. The journey to the monastery as a prisoner was both terrifying and enlightening for Sarah. She observed every detail of the route, memorizing landmarks and potential escape paths while maintaining an outward appearance of defeat and resignation. Collins and his accomplices grew increasingly confident as they neared the compound, discussing their plans with careless abandon. Sarah learned that the Black Serpent had been planning this operation for months. The capture of the SEAL teams was just the beginning of a larger scheme designed to humiliate American military forces and demonstrate the organization's growing power. Collins revealed that several other American military personnel had been compromised, creating a network of spies within the ranks. The monastery loomed ahead as they approached, its ancient stones now serving as walls for a modern prison. Sarah could see armed guards patrolling the perimeter and noticed the sophisticated surveillance equipment that had been installed throughout the compound. The Black Serpent had invested significant resources in converting this location into an impregnable fortress. As they passed through the main gate, Sarah caught her first glimpse of the captured SEALs. The 18 soldiers were being held in what appeared to be the monastery's former dining hall, now converted into a makeshift prison. Despite their captivity, the SEALs maintained their discipline and alertness, their eyes tracking every movement of their captors. Collins handed Sarah over to a group of Black Serpent operatives who seemed to be expecting her arrival. Their leader, a man with distinctive facial scars who introduced himself as Hassan, spoke perfect English and displayed an intimate knowledge of American military procedures. He explained that Sarah would be kept alive only as long as she proved useful in decoding American communications and providing intelligence about ongoing operations. The cell where they placed Sarah was located in the monastery's basement, a stone chamber that had probably once served as storage for the religious community that had inhabited the building centuries earlier. The walls were thick, the single window was barred, and the heavy wooden door was reinforced with steel plates. It seemed impossible to escape, which was exactly what her captors intended. As night fell on her first day in captivity, Sarah lay on the thin mattress they had provided and began planning. Her years of studying terrorist organizations had taught her that successful escapes required careful preparation, patience, and the ability to exploit the overconfidence of captors. She knew that the Black Serpent operatives viewed her as a valuable but ultimately helpless asset. What they didn't understand was that Sarah had spent her entire career preparing for scenarios like this one. Her training included not just intelligence analysis, but also survival techniques, basic combat skills, and psychological warfare tactics. More importantly, she had an intimate understanding of how the Black Serpent operated, knowledge that could be turned against them if she could find the right opportunity. The sound of footsteps in the corridor outside her cell interrupted her planning. Hassan approached with 2 guards, carrying a laptop computer and a stack of printed documents. He explained that Sarah's first task would be to decode a series of intercepted American military communications. Her cooperation would determine not only her own fate, but also the treatment of the captured SEALs. As Sarah looked at the documents, she recognized immediately that they contained information about planned rescue operations and troop movements. The Black Serpent was using her expertise to stay one step ahead of American forces, turning her own skills against her countrymen. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on her shoulders as she realized that everything she did from this point forward could mean the difference between life and death for dozens of American soldiers. Hassan watched her carefully as she reviewed the materials, looking for any sign of deception or resistance. Sarah maintained a neutral expression while her mind raced through possibilities. She needed to find a way to provide information that would appear helpful to the Black Serpent while actually working against their interests. It was a dangerous game that required perfect execution. The night stretched ahead with its own particular terrors. Sarah knew that dawn would bring new challenges and that her captor's patience wouldn't last indefinitely. She had to find a way to escape, not just for her own survival, but to save the 18 Navy SEALs whose lives depended on her ability to turn the tables on the Black Serpent. The monastery's ancient walls might have contained prayers for centuries, but now they would witness a very different kind of battle for survival. The morning brought with it a harsh awakening as Hassan returned with more demands. Sarah had spent the night developing a complex strategy that would require her to walk a razor-thin line between cooperation and sabotage. She needed to convince her captors that she was providing valuable intelligence while secretly undermining their operations and gathering information for her eventual escape. Sarah began her deception by demonstrating genuine expertise in decoding the intercepted communications. She provided accurate translations of routine military chatter, building Hassan's confidence in her abilities while carefully avoiding any information that could compromise active operations. Her knowledge of military protocols allowed her to identify which communications were safe to decode and which contained sensitive operational details. As the days passed, Sarah began to understand the full scope of the Black Serpent's operation. The monastery served as more than just a prison. It was a sophisticated intelligence-gathering center where captured soldiers were interrogated and American communications were analyzed. Hassan revealed that they had been monitoring American military frequencies for months, building a comprehensive picture of troop movements and operational procedures. The captured Navy SEALs were being held in increasingly harsh conditions as Hassan grew frustrated with their refusal to provide information. Sarah could hear their defiant responses to interrogation sessions, their voices carrying through the monastery's stone corridors. Their courage in the face of torture inspired her own determination to find a way to save them, even as she struggled with the moral complexity of her situation. Sarah's breakthrough came when Hassan brought her a series of communications that he believed contained details about a major American military operation. In reality, the messages were part of a disinformation campaign designed to confuse enemy intelligence services. Sarah recognized the false information immediately, but realized she could use Hassan's ignorance to her advantage. She began providing Hassan with carefully crafted analyses that contained just enough accurate information to maintain his trust while gradually leading the Black Serpent into strategic mistakes. Her knowledge of American military deception tactics allowed her to identify which false information would be most likely to mislead her captors without seeming obviously fabricated. The psychological pressure of maintaining this deception was enormous. Sarah had to constantly monitor her own behavior, ensuring that she appeared cooperative while secretly working against her captor's interests. Any slip in her performance could result in torture or death, not just for herself, but potentially for the captured SEALs as well. During her 4th day in captivity, Sarah made a disturbing discovery about the extent of the Black Serpent's intelligence network. While reviewing intercepted communications, she found evidence that Collins was not the only American military personnel who had been compromised. The organization had spent years cultivating sources within various branches of the American military, creating a web of treachery that extended far beyond what anyone had suspected. This revelation added a new dimension to Sarah's mission. Even if she could escape and rescue the SEALs, the broader intelligence network would continue to pose a threat to American operations throughout the region. She realized that her escape would need to accomplish multiple objectives: freeing the captured soldiers, exposing the extent of the betrayal, and gathering enough intelligence to dismantle the Black Serpent's spy network. Hassan's growing trust in Sarah's abilities provided her with increased access to the monastery's communications equipment and intelligence files. She began memorizing details about the organization's structure, funding sources, and operational plans while maintaining her facade of reluctant cooperation. Each piece of information she gathered would be crucial for the intelligence services that would need to unravel the Black Serpent's network after her escape. The monastery's daily routines became increasingly familiar to Sarah as she identified patterns in guard rotations, mealtimes, and communication schedules. She noticed that security was most relaxed during the afternoon prayer periods when many of the operatives would gather in the monastery's former chapel for religious observances. This routine adherence to religious practice created a potential window of opportunity for escape. Sarah also began to assess the physical capabilities and mental state of each captured SEAL she encountered. During her escorted movements through the compound, she made brief eye contact with several of the prisoners, attempting to communicate her presence and intentions through subtle gestures. The SEALs, trained to recognize and exploit any opportunity for escape, began responding with their own coded signals. The communication between Sarah and the SEALs developed slowly and carefully over several days. Using a combination of hand signals, facial expressions, and carefully timed movements, they established a basic understanding that an escape attempt was being planned. The SEALs began preparing mentally and physically for the possibility of action, maintaining their fitness through exercises performed in their cells, and staying alert for any opportunity. Hassan's confidence in Sarah reached a new level when she successfully decoded a series of communications that led to the Black Serpent avoiding what they believed was an American military trap. In reality, Sarah had identified legitimate operational security measures and convinced Hassan that they represented a sophisticated ambush designed to capture Black Serpent operatives. Her deception not only protected American forces, but also enhanced her credibility with her captors. This success provided Sarah with her greatest opportunity yet. Hassan decided to include her in a high-level planning session where Black Serpent leaders would discuss their next major operation. The meeting would give her access to intelligence that could cripple the organization's future activities, but it would also place her in the same room with the most dangerous and suspicious members of the terrorist group. The planning session took place in what had once been the monastery's library, now converted into a command center filled with communication equipment, maps, and computer terminals. Sarah found herself surrounded by men who had spent years perfecting the art of violence and deception. Any mistake on her part would be immediately recognized by individuals who had survived through constant vigilance and paranoia. As the meeting progressed, Sarah learned the full scope of the Black Serpent's ambitions. The capture of the Navy SEALs was just the first phase of a larger operation designed to humiliate American military forces and demonstrate the organization's growing power. They planned to stage a public execution of the captured soldiers while simultaneously launching coordinated attacks on American positions throughout the region. The timeline for these operations was frighteningly short. Hassan revealed that the public execution was scheduled for the following week, with international media invited to witness what the Black Serpent viewed as a demonstration of American military weakness. The coordinated attacks would occur simultaneously, creating maximum psychological impact while American forces were distracted by the horrific spectacle of their captured comrades' deaths. Sarah realized that her window for escape was rapidly closing. Once the Black Serpent moved forward with their planned operations, the security around the monastery would become even tighter, and any chance of saving the SEALs would disappear. She needed to act quickly, but her escape plan would require perfect timing and a significant amount of luck to succeed. The meeting also revealed crucial intelligence about the Black Serpent's command structure and communication methods. Sarah memorized details about their secure communication frequencies, operational codes, and the locations of other facilities throughout the region. This information would be invaluable to American intelligence services, but only if she could survive long enough to deliver it. As the planning session concluded, Hassan made an announcement that sent chills through Sarah's entire body. He revealed that she would be required to participate in the interrogation of the Navy SEALs, using her knowledge of American military procedures to help extract information about ongoing operations. Her refusal would result in her immediate execution, while her cooperation would cement her value to the organization. That evening, as Sarah returned to her cell, she knew that the time for planning had ended. Tomorrow would bring demands that she could not fulfill without betraying everything she believed in. The interrogation of American soldiers would cross a line that she was not willing to cross, regardless of the personal consequences. Her escape attempt would have to begin immediately, even though her preparations were incomplete. The monastery grew quiet as night fell, with only the essential guard posts remaining active. Sarah lay on her mattress, listening to the sounds of the compound and timing the movements of the guards outside her cell. She had identified a narrow window of opportunity during the early morning hours when the guard rotation created a brief gap in surveillance of the corridor leading to the main communications room. Her plan was audacious and dangerous, requiring her to navigate through multiple layers of security while avoiding detection by guards who would not hesitate to kill her if discovered. She would need to access the communications equipment to send a distress signal to American forces, locate and free the captured SEALs, and find a way out of the heavily fortified compound before her absence was discovered. The psychological weight of what she was attempting pressed down on her as she prepared for action. 18 American soldiers were counting on her, even though most of them didn't know of her existence or her plans. Their families would never know how close their loved ones had come to a horrific death, or how a single woman's courage and determination had made the difference between rescue and tragedy. As the monastery's clocks chimed midnight, Sarah began the most dangerous mission of her life. The ancient stones that surrounded her had witnessed centuries of human drama, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold. The skills she had developed over years of intelligence work would now be tested in the most direct and immediate way possible, with the lives of America's elite soldiers hanging in the balance. The escape began at exactly 2:17 a.m. when Sarah heard the familiar sound of the guard change in the corridor outside her cell. Years of studying human behavior patterns had taught her that people were most vulnerable during routine activities, and the Black Serpent operatives had fallen into predictable patterns during her days of observation. The brief moment when the outgoing guard departed and the incoming guard had not yet settled into position created a window of opportunity that lasted less than 90 seconds. Sarah had spent hours working on the ancient lock mechanism of her cell door, using a small metal fragment she had carefully extracted from the bed frame. The lock was old but sturdy, requiring patience and precision to manipulate without creating noise that would alert nearby guards. Her fingers worked with steady determination as she felt the tumblers gradually align, each small click bringing her closer to freedom. The door opened silently on hinges that Sarah had been lubricating with small amounts of food grease saved from her meals. Every detail of her escape had been planned and prepared over days of careful observation and patient work. She slipped into the corridor, her bare feet making no sound on the cold stone floor as she moved toward the staircase that led to the upper levels of the monastery. The communications room was located on the second floor, in what had once been the monastery's scriptorium where monks had copied religious texts. Now it housed sophisticated electronic equipment that the Black Serpent used to monitor American military communications and coordinate their operations. Sarah knew that accessing this equipment was crucial to her mission, both for calling for help and for gathering the intelligence that would expose the full extent of the terrorist organization's capabilities. Moving through the monastery's corridors required her to avoid not only the human guards but also the electronic surveillance systems that Hassan had shown her during their meetings. The Black Serpent had installed motion sensors at key points throughout the building, but Sarah had identified blind spots in their coverage by carefully observing the guards' movements and noting which areas they avoided during their patrols. The journey to the communications room took nearly 20 minutes as Sarah moved carefully from shadow to shadow, pausing frequently to listen for any indication that her escape had been discovered. Her heart pounded with each step, but her training helped her maintain the calm focus necessary for such a delicate operation. Any mistake would not only end her own life, but would seal the fate of the 18 Navy SEALs who were depending on her success. Reaching the communications room required Sarah to disable a simple but effective alarm system that the Black Serpent had installed on the door. Her knowledge of electronics, gained through years of studying terrorist communication methods, allowed her to identify the alarm's components and carefully disconnect them without triggering the alert. The process took valuable minutes, but it was essential to avoid detection during the most crucial phase of her mission. Inside the communications room, Sarah found herself surrounded by equipment that represented the full scope of the Black Serpent's intelligence-gathering capabilities. Multiple radio receivers were tuned to various American military frequencies. Computer terminals displayed intercepted communications, and sophisticated encryption devices were connected to satellite communication systems. The terrorist organization had invested heavily in their ability to monitor and disrupt American operations. Sarah's first priority was to establish contact with American forces and provide them with the monastery's exact location and the intelligence she had gathered about the Black Serpent's planned operations. She activated a secure communication system and began transmitting on an emergency frequency that she knew would be monitored by American intelligence services around the clock. Her message was brief, but contained all the essential information needed for a rescue operation. The response came within minutes, confirming that her transmission had been received and that rescue forces were being mobilized. Sarah provided additional details about the monastery's defenses, the number of guards, and the location where the seals were being held. She also transmitted the crucial intelligence about the Black Serpent's broader network and their planned attacks, information that would be essential for preventing future terrorist operations. With the communication established, Sarah turned her attention to the computer terminals that contained detailed files about the Black Serpent's operations. Working quickly, she began copying files that would expose the organization's funding sources, command structure, and the identities of their American collaborators. The intelligence she gathered in those few minutes would prove invaluable in dismantling the terrorist network and preventing future attacks. Her work in the communications room was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor outside. One of the guards was making an unscheduled patrol, possibly alerted by some subtle change in the monastery's routine that Sarah had not anticipated. She quickly completed her data transfer and prepared to leave, knowing that discovery at this point would compromise not only her escape, but also the rescue operation that was already in motion. The guard's footsteps passed the communications room without stopping, but Sarah knew that her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. The monastery would soon be awakening for the day's activities, and her absence from the cell would inevitably be discovered. She needed to reach the seals and prepare them for the rescue operation before the Black Serpent realized that their security had been compromised. The journey to the main hall where the seals were imprisoned required Sarah to traverse the most heavily guarded section of the monastery. She moved with increased urgency, knowing that time was running out but still maintaining the caution necessary to avoid detection. The building's ancient architecture provided numerous hiding places and alternative routes that she exploited to avoid the main guard positions. Reaching the hall where the seals were held presented Sarah with her greatest challenge yet. The room was under constant surveillance by 2 guards, and the prisoners were secured with restraints that would require time and tools to remove. Sarah needed to create a distraction that would draw the guards away while also alerting the seals to prepare for action. Her solution came from her knowledge of the monastery's infrastructure systems. During her days in captivity, she had observed that the building's electrical system was old and unreliable, prone to failures that the Black Serpent operatives had learned to expect. Sarah accessed the main electrical panel and systematically disabled circuits in a pattern that would simulate a routine system failure while actually cutting power to the surveillance cameras and communication systems. The electrical failure created exactly the confusion Sarah needed. Guards throughout the monastery began investigating the power outage, following standard procedures that temporarily drew them away from their posts. Sarah used this distraction to approach the hall where the seals were held, quickly overwhelming the remaining guards with techniques she had learned during her combat training. The 18 Navy SEALs were weak from their captivity, but immediately ready for action when Sarah explained the situation. Their training allowed them to adapt quickly to the changing circumstances, and within minutes they had organized themselves into an effective fighting force despite their physical limitations. The senior non-commissioned officer, Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, took command and began coordinating the group's movements toward the monastery's exit points. Sarah provided the SEALs with detailed information about the monastery's layout, guard positions, and surveillance systems. Her days of observation and her access to the Black Serpent's intelligence files had given her comprehensive knowledge of the compound's security measures. The SEALs used this information to plan their escape route, identifying the path that would minimize their exposure to enemy fire while maximizing their chances of reaching the extraction point. The escape from the monastery became a running battle as the Black Serpent operatives realized what was happening and mobilized their forces to prevent the prisoners from reaching freedom. The SEALs, despite their weakened condition, fought with the skill and determination that had made them among America's most elite soldiers. Sarah stayed close to Chief Rodriguez, continuing to provide intelligence about the compound's layout and the enemy's likely responses. Hassan appeared at the monastery's main entrance, leading a group of heavily armed operatives in a desperate attempt to recapture the escaping prisoners. His face showed a mixture of rage and disbelief as he realized that the woman he had trusted with crucial intelligence had been deceiving him all along. The betrayal cut deep, not just because of its tactical implications, but because it represented a fundamental failure of his judgment and leadership. The battle at the monastery's entrance was intense, but brief. The SEALs, fighting for their lives and their freedom, overwhelmed the Black Serpent operatives with superior training and unshakable determination. Sarah contributed to the fight using skills she had never expected to need, her intelligence training combining with adrenaline and desperation to make her an effective combatant in the chaotic struggle. The sound of approaching helicopters filled the air as American rescue forces arrived at the monastery. The timing was perfect, with the extraction teams arriving just as Sarah and the SEALs had fought their way to the compound's outer perimeter. The sight of American military aircraft was the most beautiful thing any of them had ever seen, representing not just rescue but vindication of their courage and determination. The helicopter extraction was conducted under fire as remaining Black Serpent operatives attempted to prevent the rescue. Sarah found herself in the surreal position of being lifted to safety while bullets flew around the helicopter, the monastery falling away beneath them as they rose toward the safety of American airspace. The 18 SEALs were silent during the flight, each processing the reality of their survival and rescue in their own way. The intelligence that Sarah had gathered during her captivity proved to be a treasure trove of information about the Black Serpent's operations. Within days of her rescue, American and Allied forces had begun operations to dismantle the terrorist network, using her intelligence to locate facilities, freeze funding sources, and capture key operatives. The organization that had seemed so powerful and threatening was revealed to be vulnerable when their secrets were exposed. Collins and the other American collaborators were arrested within hours of Sarah's debriefing. The extent of their betrayal shocked military leadership, but Sarah's intelligence allowed investigators to trace the full scope of the treachery and ensure that all compromised personnel were identified and removed. The spy network that had cost American lives was dismantled completely, preventing future attacks and restoring security to military operations throughout the region. The aftermath of the rescue operation brought recognition and awards for Sarah's extraordinary courage and intelligence work. Military leaders credited her with not only saving the lives of 18 Navy SEALs, but also exposing a terrorist network that could have continued to threaten American forces for years. Her actions demonstrated that heroism could take many forms and that intellectual courage was just as important as physical bravery in protecting national security. For Sarah, the real satisfaction came not from the recognition, but from the knowledge that she had made a difference when it mattered most. The 18 SEALs had returned safely to their families, the Black Serpent network had been destroyed, and American forces throughout the region were safer because of her actions. She had faced her greatest test, and emerged not just as a survivor but as a true hero whose courage had changed the course of events. The monastery returned to silence after the rescue, its ancient stones once again bearing witness to the eternal struggle between good and evil. The building that had served as a prison for America's elite soldiers would eventually crumble, but the story of their rescue would live on as an inspiration to future generations of those who served their country in dangerous and difficult circumstances.